All right, welcome back to Beach Shared Chats. I'm Brian Kaiser here today on a beautiful day here in springtime here on a I think it's Wednesday. It's opening day of baseball, which is exciting if you're a Yankees fan, which I'm not. But enough about baseball. Even though baseball reminds me of summer, I'm excited to have a great guest here, Adina Rudin. How are you today? How are you today, Adina?
I am doing well, thanks.
Are
How are
are
you?
you a baseball fan by chance, or is it
Um,
as
I'm not the biggest sports person, but
it's
I would say
okay?
my default team is not the Yankees either.
Well, then, okay, then you can stay on the show. Then I'm kidding. I would never throw anybody off. Equal opportunity podcast guest. So, you are, tell us a little bit about you. You have Pride Literacy. Talk a little bit about Pride Literacy.
Sure. So PRIDE is actually an acronym. It stands for Personalized Reading Instruction Designed for Everyone. And after being a literacy specialist for many years in schools, as well as serving as director of student services and a school administrator, um, I left and I decided to open my own business,
Mm,
where my main focus is working, directly with students. I love working with kids, and so I offer one-on-one for, more intensive intervention. And then for students who don't need as intensive, or for parents who can't afford the high cost of, one-on-one sessions, I do offer small groups as
mhm.
well. My goal is to reach as many kids as possible.
So, the obviously the inspiration when you think about what, when you made that change, what was the thing that officially said, okay, I'm done with this. I want to do this now. What made that change for you?
Sure. Yeah. So it's interesting. I had worked at a school for 12 years, and I loved it. It was great there. And I only left, not to make a lateral move, but to become a school administrator and director of student services. And that was at a different school. And I was there for 2 years. And I realized that even though I was brought in to sort of, spruce up their learning center and help with that, um, when it came down to it, they weren't actually willing to make changes the way that they
Mm,
needed to be. And I just wasn't willing to be an administrator of a school that was not following best practices. So I left that and said, I'm going to do this and partner with as many schools and educators and families as possible so that, I could bring more awareness to best practices.
what would be some of those best practices you talked about them where they struggle with, right? Or not even, I don't know if it would be a question if they struggle with it, maybe they just don't invest in it. Is that kind of, what do you think, what are those areas where schools could do better if you had to give advice and be a consultant to a school? What are some things that they could do to improve?
Sure. So I think, the first part is really looking at the data that they have, no matter what program they're using, because no change happens overnight. So look at the data and look at where are their students succeeding and thriving, and where are the students falling short, and how does that compare to, benchmark for those grade levels, but also how does it compare to the rest of the country, and looking into, okay, well, what can we do now to change that to make it better? And sometimes, most of the time, that requires hard conversations, and
Hmm.
sometimes even, as an educational leader, sometimes it's admitting, hey, we tried this way and it didn't work, and now I'm open to trying something new.
Well, I think that you hit an important point, benchmarks, right? And I think sometimes benchmarks are almost unrealistic for the age group, right? If you work with kids in kindergarten or first grade and say, we need to be reading at this level, but we've skipped all these parts, but yet we have these benchmarks, we don't deliver upon them. Now we have like lower reading scores and we're just not meeting our mark, right? Do you feel like that's always become like a systemic problem of having high benchmarks or just unrealistic for the age group?
Sometimes, yes. And I think sometimes, it's a little bit what you touched upon, which, the benchmark might be, where it should be, but the steps to get there are not followed through.
Yeah.
And then that's not following the process is what creates those unrealistic benchmarks.
And it's always a fun thing about administration. I work in higher ed, and it's the same stuff. And you get these administrations. We have a new policy, and we're speak it to existence. So let it be written. So let it be done. And we make it so. And so schools are like, how do we meet this benchmark? It makes no sense. It seems out of touch, ill-informed, and yet we have to deliver. Like even where I'm at, they're getting rid of developmental English courses, which is a problem just because of placement and students coming out of the high school systems not English composition ready. They're going to struggle. But in advanced courses and other courses that they don't have the literacy skills, the writing comprehension, it's just going to be a mess. But it was created by administration somewhere out in the ether, and here we are. But that makes you pivot, right? You got out of this and you have created your own. So, what have been some of the things you've enjoyed about being on your own, creating your own work that you do in individual one-on-one? And what have been some of the struggles that you face with it?
Sure. So I'd say one of the best things for me is, being able to make my own schedule. That's definitely,
It's
a
a
freedom
perk. That's a
that.
perk. I could
Yeah.
love to make my own schedule some days.
Yeah, so it's nice and it's also nice getting to, work with families and educators who are genuinely invested in it
Mhm.
and who really, want to see the difference, want to see a change. That's my ultimate goal is to just help bridge the literacy gap. I mean, the nation's report card is not looking too great right
No,
now.
it's no.
And I think that there's also sometimes a lot of gatekeeping within the education community
Mhm.
of, well, we can't let all the parents know this because, then what is going to happen to our jobs? And, um, at the end of the day, my goal is to reach as many people as possible. And one of the things I'm actually currently working on is creating more resources for parents who genuinely want to help, but they're not educators and they
Mhm.
don't know how or where to begin.
So that's a great question for that's a great pivot to parents, right? Because parents are in this weird place. So you're passionate about helping parents, empowering parents. What's one of the things you wish every parent of a struggling reader knew right now?
Sure. So I think the most important thing since majority of my work has been with younger kids, ages 5 through 10, let's say. And so for the really little kids, for kindergartners, first graders, even second graders, um, parents don't always realize that their birthday, their age, and the grade makes a huge difference, right? If you're
Hmm.
one of the youngest in a kindergarten class versus the oldest in a kindergarten class, developmentally, it is a drastic
Oh
difference.
yeah.
And parents don't always realize that. And they don't always realize that, maybe their kid just isn't developmentally ready to
Hmm.
be reading on a level as, similar peers in the same grade who might be older.
Well, that's very true, right? Because my background's developmental psychology, and then is that one of those physical developments and the things that come with it, and just being able to comprehend. And if they're behind, it's not their fault. It's just when they're born. It's going to set them up for failure just because they're not to where their peers are at, just because it could be a year difference or however many months
Yeah,
head start, right? But I want to ask you this question too. With literacy and reading, do you feel that technology has hurt these things? Like the influx of excessive technology, tablets at a very young age. Do you feel like this is affecting literacy skills?
absolutely. Um, I do, and it's actually one of the reasons why, I don't do virtual sessions with
Hmm.
students. I only do in person, because I think that technology has gotten in the way enough, and especially for younger kids, when I'm working with them, they need to hold a real book. They need real
Hmm.
paper. Um,
Sensory
and
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and even just foundational reading skills, like, how do you turn the pages in a book, and um,
Hmm.
directionality, all of that, and you don't get that from swiping on a screen.
Yeah, because again, sensory development is something I'm big with, right? And how the brain develops at a very young age. And if you take away those, like I said, holding a book, it's a physical thing versus a digital device where you swipe at things and it's just comes at you and loses the effect of the things that can stimulate their mind. But even
Sure.
fine motor skills to grab a page and to turn it, it's a skill, right?
Yeah.
But reading to your kids, I can go on a tangent. It's we're at a book club here, so we have book clubs at school, and we're reading The Anxious Generation, and this is for the K through 12, and we're like, how do we fix this at the college level? But there is that huge influx of technology. And this is a whole nother rabbit hole and not about literacy, but with kids with too much technology at a very young age, whenever I see a small child with like an iPhone or a tablet and they're not being engaged, they're not being read to, they're not being played with, it makes me cringe. And
Yeah.
and like you said, and your focus is again literacy and comprehension and reading, and so it's like I said, you talked about the national report card of these areas too, and it's you're starting to see a snowball effect of things getting really bad. And I like to go back and not to trash on George Bush. I'd take George Bush today over the guy we have now. And there is this notion of No Child Left Behind was this legislation that was passed many, many moons ago. We just got to pass kids through. We got to graduate them. We got to do this. And we take away even the basics of learning. And I feel like this is catching up. And we're starting to see these kids now in college, they can't write well
Yeah.
for their age. So let me ask you this. What are some of the things that surprise you with working with kids, what they can do?
Um, I think one of the reasons I love working with kids is that they're so thirsty for knowledge. They love learning something new, even if you have a child that says like, oh, I don't like school, or I hate homework,
Hmm.
right? But the concept of learning itself is exciting to them still. Um, Most kids are not at a point in their life where they're like, I already know everything, I'm good,
Hmm.
which is nice.
Yes.
And I I think that they bring a fresh perspective to things,
Hmm.
especially um, when we do the same thing every day, sometimes we can get tunnel vision. And I think that,
Hmm.
no child is the same as the next. And,
Nope.
just seeing how their brain works and, learning. I always tell parents that I enjoy learning with their child. I don't
Hmm.
view it as just, I'm the teacher, I instruct, they learn. It's learning on both ends.
So sometimes with kids when they struggle with something, they almost like self-deprecate in a way and say they're not good at this, they struggle. How do you help kids unlearn this belief that they're bad at it, bad at school or not smart enough that they can't do this? When you face that, how do you help them get through that?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I see that a lot with kids, and especially, the older they get and the more aware that they become of, the discrepancy between their abilities and the abilities of their peers, it does discourage them very often. And I think a lot of it has to do with the language that we use and that we allow.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Obviously, in homes, parents are gonna do what they want, but at least, within the classroom or educational settings, simple things like if a child makes a mistake when I'm working with them, if they're reading and they're working on decoding and they pronounce a word wrong, I don't say no, I say try again.
Hmm.
And those simple shifts of, like it's validating them, it's giving them the the empowerment to know like, hey, I can try again and do better next time. I'm still
Hmm.
learning. It's not. an automatic, it's not a failure.
Hmm.
Um, and actually, it's something that the word fail is something that I tell my students, especially the older ones who say, I'm just going to fail this.
Hmm.
Um, I don't remember where I heard it, but many, many years ago in some professional development course, I was taught that can stand for first attempt in learning.
Hmm.
Um, and that always really stuck with me. And it's something that I try to teach kids, it just means that it didn't work out the first time. Doesn't mean that, this is the end all be all. And uh finding small wins and giving real praise, not like, oh, that's amazing or you're so smart, but you did a really great job, reading that hard passage today, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I like that fail acronym. I might use that with my college students. I just talked to my college students the other day about failure, right? And they always get obsessed with failing. It's even at this level, 18,
Yeah.
19, 20-year olds are so obsessed with failing. I like that first attempt in learning, and I think it's that I talked about growth mindset and fixed mindset. And again,
Yeah,
that your acronym is very much growth mindset, right? You say, oh, I
absolutely.
didn't do this, but we tried it again. Let's do one more thing and see if we can learn it. It's like even the zone of proximal development and scaffolding, right?
Yeah.
That's your job as a teacher, as a one-on-one to help them see their, again, wins, to master something that they didn't know before. And when they achieve that, for you, for them, it's a sign of joy because they can do it, right? And probably for you, just as much that it's a sign of joy that you are making a difference for these kids. Now, sometimes let me ask you this question. Um, I always, as a parent, we do our best to help our kids. Sometimes with educators, or even in your work too, as still an educator, you do this stuff, right? And you help and you provide these skills, but it's not reinforced at home. Do you see
Yeah.
that a lot of times, even in your previous work, or do you see it now? Like you do all these things, you see their kids make wins, and then all of a sudden they go home. It's like a massive reset because it's not reinforced. Do you see that a lot?
I do. I definitely saw it more when I was, in a school setting. Parents are who are paying for, private sessions with
Hmm.
their kids generally are a little more invested and pay more attention. But even there, I mean, it's hard. I'm a parent too. Schedules are busy.
Hmm.
And I only have one child, but parents who have, a couple of kids, it's hard to balance it all. But I definitely do see that happen. And my thing always as a teacher in the classroom and also one-on-one is I give homework, but the homework has to be meaningful. It has to be intentional. It's not
Hmm.
busy work, and it has to be something that students should be able to do on their own. Um, for me, really the only parent involvement for the younger kids is that the child has to read to them. And sometimes they have to, give their child, dictations to write down. But
Hmm.
that's it. The reading itself, it's all skills that the students should know. And it's generally not something that they're reading for the first time if they're bringing it home.
Yeah, I think that's great too to have because it's going to reinforce that their abilities to, reading comprehension. They read it, they comprehend it, they can actually repeat it, they can, and it shows success, right? So even for parents to reinforce those wins too, not just you, but them as well. So have them advocating for their kids, be invested in what their child's development is huge because I see it all the time that there's a lot of parents who aren't. They want you to do it all. They want you to fix it. They want you to make their kids smart or learn this, but you know encouraging parents to say you can do this too, and empowering them. I think parents do need that because I think there's a confusion ever since COVID. There's been a really big kind of I don't know. I'm gonna use confusion again by parents of what to do because we live in an online world and all this stuff got removed, and here we are back and trying to get all this stuff back on track. So I think the work you do is, great for that to help parents help kids so they can, when I get them in college, they can read and write. So I appreciate that because.
Yeah, and I do see a difference since COVID as well. I do think
Mm,
COVID had, a much bigger impact
mhm.
than we initially realized.
Well, the socialization, but just the removal of the
Yeah.
sensory stuff, put everything online. It did a lot. I think the outcomes we're going to start seeing that from several years down the road. We're starting to see it now, like what the research being done on this, and I think yeah, the education's been hurt. I mean, even in college students just weren't engaged, and universities and colleges found ways to give them like almost like a pass, like, oh, because of COVID we're going to extend the drop date, or we can allow you to change your grades to pass fail versus a grade because of COVID. So it was a weird time from an educational standpoint. Now outside of education, right, you do this work, you're invested, plus running your own business is a lot, right? Do your own thing. It's a pretty heavy endeavor, right?
Yes.
How do you digress outside? You mentioned being a parent. How do you take time for yourself and bring joy outside of work? What are some of the things you do?
Sure. I love nature. I That's one of the reasons I was initially drawn to your podcast.
It's a
The beach is
beach.
a happy place.
I mean, it's like a, I mean, who knows? If we're at the beach, we may not be doing shop talk. It could just be what, but this is the idea, right? We're doing shop talk or work talk or anything now at the beach, but the beach is a great place for just to relax. And so that's kind of the concept behind it because I love the beach. I like to relax, but I like to talk. So, but again, so you like nature. What are some of your favorite places to be outside of the beach too?
Sure. I love hiking. So, anything good trails, with scenic views or even just, mountains are really great. I'm
Mm.
based in New Jersey, so, uh Garden State,
Mm-hmm.
there are, a number of really awesome trails. I enjoy reading,
Mm-hmm.
which is not a surprise
No.
given my profession.
Yes.
Um, I like spending family time, with my
Mm-hmm.
daughter, my partner.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and yeah, we play games. We have game nights, board games, video games, which my partner and my daughter have,
Yeah.
slowly convinced me to get into. But
They have
yeah,
their place. They have their spot. They have their place. Yeah, video games has brought this up the other day. Video games are so different now. When I was a kid, again, I had a Nintendo, so I'm gonna age myself here.
yeah,
And it had one television. I can tell a story. It was a Zenith television, so that's even much older than those box furniture type TVs. It's like you had like
yeah,
this large thing with a television inside of it. And I would play with my brother. We had two controllers, and it was very still social, right?
yeah,
And even went to college, it was still social, right? You could hang out with your friends and still talk trash, say beat you, whatever, but it was still engaged socially. But then you moved it to the online world, and again, it's very text heavy, very chat heavy, a lot of information coming and going while you're gaming. To me, I think it's exhausting, but I also think Mario Brothers is still a hard thing for me to do. It's the big jump in Mario Brother. I can never make the jump thing because it's like I never had
yeah.
enough confidence as Mario to make the jump. Um, but gaming's fun. What books you're reading? I've been actually doing that too. 2026, I made it a goal because I do enjoy reading. In the past, I just haven't made time for it, which is a sad reality. I always read academic stuff, which is cool and all, but I say 2026, I'm gonna read books. I'm gonna read more books. I got my library card out, check them out, and they're well for me. So what book are you reading right now?
Yeah, I'm actually towards the end of the first book in a series. It's called Before the Coffee Gets Cold.
Ooh,
Um,
that's a
I don't remember the exact name of the author. I'm really bad at that, actually remembering
hmm.
author names. It is it was translated. It is a Japanese author who, and then it was translated into English. It's a really interesting concept, actually. It's about, if you can go back in time to any day in history
Hmm.
and, meet someone who's no longer with you,
Hmm.
um, what would you do and say, knowing that, you know, the outcome can't change,
Hmm.
nothing in the present day will be different. So it's interesting.
Well, who would you go back in time to visit?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably my grandmother.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I grew up with one set of grandparents.
Hmm.
My my grandparents on my mom's side were Holocaust survivors, actually,
Okay.
and both passed away when my mom was a teenager, so I never met them.
Hmm.
I'm named after that grandmother, and from what I've been told, we're similar, and she would have liked me a lot. But also my dad's mom, she passed away a number of years ago, and um, she was a pretty awesome woman. She actually came to America on the last boat out of Germany, you know,
Okay.
before the war really started. And so she came here when she was 5 years old, not knowing a word of English.
Hmm.
And then fast forward many years, she became, a biochemist and worked for Pfizer, actually, at a time
Nice.
when women weren't even
Wow.
necessarily working.
Are
So,
even given
yeah,
that chance, right? And you women back that, what they could do when they're given permission. My mother was
yeah,
in college, but she was a secretary. They had secretarial school. The college is it was like, it was just, yeah, you got a career, but you were still just an assistant to somebody
yeah,
else, right? Times have evolved. You see women in positions of power and influence, almost the president. Um, and educators, doctors, all things, right? And it's key for that. Now let me ask you this question: who would you want to meet today that's obviously alive and famous or notable? Who would you want to meet if you haven't met them before?
Hmm. That's that's a really great question. Um, I don't know that I have one specific person in mind. I know a lot of people would probably choose, like, a celebrity or a politician.
Hmm.
I would love to meet anyone who is genuinely open to conversation and have an open mind. I think that's
Hmm.
something that's lacking today. I think that people are very closed-minded. It's very like,
Hmm.
you're a Democrat, you're a Republican,
Hmm.
you're this, you're that, and they box themselves in and surround themselves with only similar people.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, I think, that's obviously a conversation for another time, different topic, but I
Well,
think that's, what's led to some of the issues in the world today. And, I think critical thinking is a skill that, you know, um, is not taught often enough anymore.
mhm.
And so, yeah, anyone who's just open-minded and able to, use
Yeah.
their own thinking.
Well, that's kind of like why I created this, right? I like conversations and because the thing with this thing that I'm doing, I don't know pretty much the people that I'm interviewing. I've
Right.
never met you before.
Yeah.
There are a few people that I've interviewed, but that I've known from acquaintances, but not like, for me, it's just like I want to have conversations with strangers, right? And hear their story, share their story. But yeah, I never know what's going to happen right on this. But you're right. We live in a time where we're so boxed in categories. And we're afraid to say something because it could either offend somebody, they're not going to agree with it, especially in the online world. If you've stated a belief or a point, I think there's always times like on threads of like, I want to make this point, but I don't want all the backlash. I don't want
Right.
someone coming on and say, I don't agree with you, I hate this, you're whatever. Like, I just don't want the headache, so I'll just post pictures of sunsets. Safer. Um, but you're right. I think doing that is important. I think we need to live in a time, it doesn't matter who it is, you can sit down, have a conversation with somebody that might be a difference of opinions and have it peacefully and civil. I miss the civil days. I don't think we've
Yes.
had civil conversations in this country since 2016, 2020, somewhere in there. There's a timeline where it's just gotten worse.
Yeah.
And we've seen families fall apart. We've seen relationships fall apart just because of politics, because it becomes so polarized. So hopefully we can get back to a day where we can actually talk to your neighbor that you disagree with, but it's okay. They're not gonna like
Yeah.
cast you out and say horrible things, where I can go to the beach and see someone's like, no, you have a funny hat on, I'm out. We're gonna go over here. And I don't want to sit. And you get the idea. So hopefully
Yeah.
this has been a pleasant experience for you, having you on today.
Absolutely.
It's not the beach. It is on camera. It is a Zoom thing, but soon enough you'll be at the Jersey Shores. That's one area I have not been to is the Jersey Shores. I've heard they're beautiful beaches in Jersey. I'm more of a Rhode Island because it's close to where I live. So someday
All right.
I might venture down to Jersey.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Dina, thank you for being on. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you get to enjoy the rest of this beautiful day.
Thank you. You as well. Thank you for having me.